When Aidan Levy, author of Saxophone Colossus, The Life and Music of Sonny Rollins, appeared on Sunday Night Live, I asked him about the relationship between Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane. For many years, many listeners have talked about this.
Sonny recognized immediately that this was a friendly rivalry, that he and Coltrane were musical compatriots and they were fast friends.
Sonny Rollins had a very important relationship with John Coltrane. In your book, Aidan, you mention a Miles Davis gig in the mid 50s with both tenor players where Miles tried to kind of egg on Sonny, in a way, start a rivalry of sorts. Could you talk about that gig and the Sonny Rollins John Coltrane relationship and how the Tenor Madness session happened?
I've dated that gig to 1951 at the Audubon Ballroom, which would have both Sonny and Train in their 20s. So they're young at this point. And on the gig, it was Miles's gig. It was one of these dances that they were playing. I think it was an afternoon show. Bud Powell on piano, of course. Percy Heath on the bass. And then on drums, it was either Kenny Clarke or Art Blakey. Sonny insists that it was Kenny Clarke, and Coltrane, I believe, was quoted as saying it was Blakey. Now, I couldn't quite pin down which drummer it was on the gig. I would defer to Sonny on this one. But yeah, I mean, what a band. So Sonny says that Miles would sometimes walk up to him and whisper something in his ear when Train was playing. And then he'd walk up to Train and whisper something in Train's ear when he was playing. He started to notice that there was this sense of stoking a rivalry, stoking that sense of competition between them. However, I think that Sonny recognized immediately that this was a friendly rivalry, that he and Coltrane were musical compatriots and they were fast friends, really. Although at the time, it's worth noting that even though Sonny was younger, he was such a prodigy that he was really on the map before Coltrane was. At that Audubon Ballroom gig, Jackie McLean got all of his friends together and they went down and they were all kind of rooting for Sonny, that there was this idea that it was going to be like a tenor battle. And according to Jackie McLean, Sonny kind of won that night. Although there were other gigs when, according to Sonny, Coltrane outblew him. Now, this went on for years, that they had this friendly rivalry and they would just advance each other's musical ideas. They would talk on the phone, they would visit each other, and they also had a spiritual connection and they would recommend books to each other. Like Sonny recommended the book Autobiography of a Yogi to Coltrane. The Tenor Madness album was recorded in May of 1956, and Sonny, for that album, used the rhythm section from the First Great Quintet, Miles Davis's First Great Quintet. So he had Philly Joe Jones, Paul Chambers, and Red Garland on there. And I guess for moral support, John Coltrane came and was just outside in the car. They recorded this at Rudy Van Gelder's studio in Hackensack, which was really Rudy Van Gelder's parents' living room. So you can imagine this scene. But it's also worth noting about that record that I said it's the rhythm section from the First Great Quintet. Now, Miles Davis's first choice for the tenor chair in that quintet was Sonny. And before he even had Sonny in the band, he was quoted in Downbeat as saying, Sonny has already accepted the offer. And this was not true at all. Sonny was in Chicago at the time when this, quote, offer was made, and ultimately turned the offer down and went with the Max Roach Clifford Brown Quintet instead. He just felt that it was a better move for him at the time, that they epitomized clean living, and he wasn't so sure that that would be the case with the Miles Davis Quintet. So Miles got Coltrane. Some people were disappointed at first when they saw Coltrane up there instead of Sonny. Of course, in hindsight, Coltrane's Coltrane. So, I mean, Coltrane is Coltrane. But when that album, Tenor Madness, was made, there is this sense of what that alternate version of the first great quintet might have sounded like. Now, apparently, Coltrane fell asleep in the car out front of Van Gelder's, and somebody had the idea, let's go and get Coltrane and have him play on the session. So Sonny invited him to play on that session, and they decided to play a blues. So what would they play? They played the tune Tenor Madness, which incidentally had been recorded by Kenny Clarke as another tune called Rue Chaptal. So it's just this epic blowing session, and some people like to pick which they prefer. I don't view it that way because, like I said, they were musical brothers and they couldn't have been closer. They had a deep musical and spiritual connection, and sometimes people want to pit them against each other, but the idea that there can only be one is, I think, deeply problematic. That why can't we have both? And this is something that I know that Sonny felt. I know that he still feels that, and it's not just both of them too. I mean, it's like I said, the whole lineage. But yes, I mean, John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, musical brothers.
Yeah, well, in jazz, there's always been this idea of a cutting contest where particularly tenor players will get up there, and in our culture now we call it GOAT, who's the greatest of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I produced a webcast in '99 with the Saxophone Summit, which is Michael Brecker, Joe Lovano, and Dave Liebman. And I said to Michael Brecker, I said to Michael, I said, you know, when you get up there in a situation like this, do you feel that you have to like play better than Lieb or Joe? He said, no, not at all. He said, this is like a tremendous learning experience. We don't approach it that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, some of the great jazz recordings, two tenor players, Johnny Griffin, Eddie Lockjaw Davis, Dexter Gordon, and Gene Ammons. I mean, some great sessions. But our culture, we have to like, who's better? Who's better? It's really not about that. It's about two musicians really inspiring each other to play better.
Yeah, it was really a mutual admiration society. And just to talk about Giant Steps for a moment, I think that Sonny was inspired by Giant Steps. And some people said, oh, Sonny was scared off by Coltrane. That's why he went on the bridge. That's not true at all. But Sonny was inspired by Giant Steps. And later on, he did play some of the material from Coltrane's repertoire. And you can hear that. Sonny's decision to take up soprano and start playing soprano more was in part inspired by Coltrane. So yes, there was that connection.
A Kenny Dorham record that Sonny was on, Coltrane took a lick from Sonny's solo and turned it into Like Sonny.
That's right. And if people want to hear that track, it's from the album Jazz Contrasts, and the track is My Old Flame. And this was something that Sonny improvised in the middle of his solo. And apparently, Coltrane played it back more than a few times because it became the melody to Like Sonny.